For 6 months, Sarah brought breakfast to an old Korean man every single morning. Scrambled eggs, a biscuit, black coffee in a paper cup. 5:45 a.m., without fail, at the same bus stop where he sat on flattened cardboard. She was 28, black, working overnight shifts as a nurse aide while studying for her RN license. He was in his late 60s, quiet, telling no stories at all, which somehow made him more mysterious than if he'd talked constantly. Then one morning at 5:12 a.m., everything changed. 3 men knocked on Sarah's apartment door. Not police, not social workers. Men in black suits with ink creeping up their necks, standing in formation like they'd done this before. When Sarah looked through the peephole, still in her scrubs from the overnight shift, her stomach dropped. She opened the door halfway, keeping the chain latched. "Sarah," the tall one in front said. Not Miss anything, just her first name, like he'd known it all along. "We need to talk about the old man you've been feeding." Behind him, the other two scanned the hallway with practiced calm. Security, bodyguards, something worse. Sarah's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Who are you?" The man in front offered a thin smile. "My name is Min Seok, and you've been very kind to someone who belongs to us." The word belongs hung in the air like smoke. "Don't worry," Min Seok continued, his politeness somehow more threatening than anger. "This won't take long, if you cooperate." Sarah understood then. Whatever she'd stepped into by bringing breakfast to a stranger, it was bigger than kindness. 6 months earlier, Sarah's life had been simple in the way exhaustion is simple. She worked as a nurse aide at a long-term care facility, picking up extra shifts whenever they'd let her, because the pay was barely enough and because her RN classes weren't going to pay for themselves. She kept her receipts in a shoebox. Budgeting made her feel less helpless, even when the numbers never quite added up. She took the 5:30 a.m. bus because it saved gas money and because her old sedan had finally died in a parking lot that would have charged $200 to tow it. That bus stop sat beside a line of tired houses and bare trees, and the glass shelter always smelled faintly of rain and cigarette smoke from the night shift workers who waited there at 4 a.m. That's where she first noticed him. An older Korean man sitting low on flattened cardboard, hands folded neatly in his lap like he was waiting for an appointment, not a handout. He wasn't begging, wasn't shouting at passers-by, wasn't even holding a sign. He just waited, with the kind of stillness that made him almost invisible. Sarah had walked past him for 2 weeks straight, telling herself she couldn't help everyone. She barely had enough for herself. Her fridge at home had exactly 3 things in it: eggs, bread, and a jar of grape jelly that was mostly empty. But one morning in late July, a Tuesday, sticky hot already at dawn, she'd packed an extra breakfast because the hospital cafeteria had been closed for cleaning the day before, and she'd ended up so hungry by noon she'd nearly passed out during wound care. Better to have backup, she'd thought, wrapping the eggs and biscuit in a napkin. The old man was awake when she approached, which startled her. His eyes were sharp in a face that seemed worn down by years of something heavier than homelessness. He watched her carefully, like he was used to people, either ignoring him or telling him to move along. "Excuse me," Sarah said, holding out the wrapped food. "I made too much. Do you want this?" He stared at the napkin, then at her face. For a long moment, he didn't move, like accepting came with a price he'd already paid before. "Please," Sarah added quietly, "no strings. Just eat something." He took it with both hands like it was something precious, and gave a small bow from his seated position. "Thank you," he said in careful English. "You're welcome." Sarah paused. "I'm Sarah." "Byung-chul," he said, meeting her eyes. She almost walked away then. Almost went back to her routine of not seeing him, not getting involved, not making her own life more complicated than it already was. But something about the way he'd said thank you, with dignity, not desperation, made her pause. "How do you take your coffee?" she asked. His eyebrows lifted slightly, surprised. "Black is fine." The next morning, she brought coffee in a paper cup and a banana. The morning after that, another wrapped breakfast and an apple. By the end of the first week, it had become a routine she couldn't imagine breaking. 5:45 a.m. every single day. Byung-chul was always there, always in the same spot, always waiting with that same careful stillness. They'd talk for 5, maybe 10 minutes before her bus came. Not about anything dramatic, just small things. She'd mention her classes. Nursing pharmacology was kicking her ass, and anatomy was somehow worse. He'd ask careful questions, like he was genuinely interested in mitosis and medication calculations. He never told her his story. No tragic monologue. No explanation of how he'd ended up on cardboard at a bus stop. Just little facts that slipped out like pennies from a torn pocket. He used to repair watches. He liked his coffee black because anything else masked the taste. He was allergic to something in peanuts. He had a sister once, but when Sarah asked where she was now, Byung-chul just looked past her and said, "Far away." Sarah figured he was just private, maybe proud, maybe carrying shame he didn't want to unpack for a stranger with a breakfast sandwich. She didn't push. She'd learned in healthcare that sometimes people needed consistency more than they needed conversation. Hello, my friends and loved ones. Thanks for joining me on this beautiful story. As we continue this story, kindly take a moment to subscribe to this channel, like the video, and I love to always hear from you. Where are you watching from, and what time is it at your end right now? Thank you for subscribing. Sarah kept the routine quiet. She didn't film it, didn't post it, didn't tell coworkers for praise or validation. She'd seen how easily good deeds got turned into content, performative kindness that was more about the giver than the person being helped. But she did notice things. The breakfast evolved as the weeks passed. When the biscuits ran out, she switched to bagels, cheaper by the bag at the grocery outlet. When bagels felt too heavy in the August heat, she brought oatmeal in a thermos, still warm from her hot plate. The coffee stayed constant. Black, always black. She learned small facts about Byung-chul the way you learn about patients, slowly, through observation, more than confession. He used to repair watches. She'd caught him once examining the mechanism of a broken timepiece someone had left in the bus shelter, his fingers moving with practiced precision despite the tremor. He was allergic to something in peanuts, not severely, but enough that he'd politely declined a granola bar she'd offered and pointed to the ingredient list. He had a sister. Once. When Sarah mentioned her own brother in Virginia, Byung-chul's face had shifted, something between longing and grief, and he'd said simply, "I had a sister, long time ago." Sarah didn't push. She'd learned in healthcare that sometimes people needed consistency more than they needed conversation. By mid-September, the cracks in Sarah's own life were widening. Her rent had jumped to $875 when the building changed management, $175 more than she'd budgeted for. The new landlord didn't accept payment plans or excuses, just certified checks by the 5th of each month, or a 3-day notice taped to the door. Sarah was taking 16 credit hours of nursing coursework on top of her 40-hour weeks at the facility, pharmacology, pathophysiology, care planning that made her brain feel like it was folding in on itself by midnight. She'd picked up every extra shift they'd offer, weekend doubles, holiday coverage, the overnight rotation nobody wanted because it paid an extra $1 per hour. The math was always the same, never quite enough. Her kitchen counter told the story. Electric bill, past due, student loan payment, deferred again. Cell phone, 1 month from disconnection. And in the middle of all that paper, a loaf of bread and a carton of eggs. One night in late September, Sarah stood at her counter doing calculations in her head. She'd gotten paid that afternoon. $520 from the facility, another $80 from a weekend shift. Subtract rent. Subtract bus fare for 2 weeks. Subtract the minimum payment on her credit card so they wouldn't close it. $73 left for everything else. She opened her fridge. 3 eggs, half a gallon of milk that would expire in 2 days. Wilted spinach she should have thrown out last week. Her stomach had been empty since lunch. A granola bar she'd eaten standing up during her break, but she'd learned to ignore that hollow feeling. She'd eat tomorrow, or the day after. It didn't matter. What mattered was the bread and eggs. Enough for another week of breakfast for Byung-chul. Maybe 2 weeks if she stretched it. Sarah closed the fridge and pressed her forehead against the cold metal door. She could stop. She should stop. Keep the food for herself, catch up on the electric bill before they shut it off, buy herself a proper meal for once. Byung-chul would understand. He'd probably tell her to stop if he knew how tight things were. But the thought of walking past that bus stop, seeing him there, not stopping, she couldn't do it. The next morning, Byung-chul noticed. "You are tired," he said quietly, watching her face in the dim pre-dawn light. Sarah forced a smile. "Long shift. I'm fine." Byung-chul didn't smile back. His eyes, always sharp, always observing, held hers for a moment longer than usual. "You work too much." "Bills don't pay themselves," Sarah said lightly, handing him the coffee. "And breakfast?" Byung-chul gestured to the wrapped eggs. "This pays bills." Sarah's throat tightened. "It's not about bills." "Then what is it about?" She didn't have an answer that wouldn't sound patronizing or self-righteous, so she just shrugged. "It's about showing up." Byung-chul accepted the food with both hands, as always, but this time he didn't eat right away. He just held it, looking at her with something between gratitude and concern. "You are a good person, Sarah," he said finally. "But good people must also take care of themselves." "I'm fine," Sarah repeated, even though they both knew it wasn't quite true. Her bus pulled up then, ending the conversation. It was the following Tuesday when Sarah noticed the bruising. Byung-chul was adjusting his sleeve when she arrived, pulling it down quickly, like he'd been caught at something. But not quickly enough. Sarah's nurse training kicked in before her politeness could stop her. "Byung-chul, your wrist is fine," he said, too fast. But Sarah had already seen it. Faint yellowing around his left wrist, the kind that came from pressure, from gripping, from someone's hand wrapped too tight days ago. Her pulse quickened. How did that happen? Byung-chul's face closed off. "I am clumsy, old man. I fell." It was a lie. Sarah had seen enough falls, enough accidents, enough "I'm clumsy" excuses in the ER to know the difference. Bruises from falls were scattered, chaotic. Bruises from hands were specific, patterned. She didn't accuse, she just watched him. Her mind cataloging red flags she'd been trained to recognize. Unexplained injuries, defensive responses, sudden withdrawal when questioned. "Okay," she said carefully, handing him his breakfast. "But if you ever need help—" "I am fine," Byung-chul repeated, firmer this time. Sarah's bus was coming. She had to go. But as she climbed aboard and found a seat by the window, she kept her eyes on him. Byung-chul sat very still on his cardboard, hands folded carefully in his lap, and Sarah thought, bruises don't belong to the cold. Something was wrong. The cardboard was gone. Sarah stood at the bus stop Tuesday morning, holding the wrapped breakfast and thermos, scanning the empty sidewalk like she'd somehow missed him. No Byung-chul, no flattened cardboard, no plastic bag of belongings. Even the faint impression where he usually sat, the spot worn smooth by weeks of his weight, had been erased by overnight rain. She checked the corners of the shelter, looked down the block toward the closed laundromat. Nothing. Her bus pulled up, hydraulics hissing. Sarah didn't move. The driver waited, then closed the doors and pulled away. Her chest felt hollow. She told herself it meant nothing. People moved. Shelters opened beds. Maybe someone had offered him a couch. Maybe the police had cleared the block. They did that sometimes, pushed people along without solving anything. It didn't mean something bad had happened. The second bus came. Sarah let it pass too. By the time she finally climbed aboard the third bus, she was going to be late for her shift, and the hollow feeling had hardened into something sharper. At work, Sarah moved through her tasks on autopilot. Vital signs, medication pass, wound care on Mrs. Chen's pressure ulcer, assist Mr. Patterson to the bathroom. Document, document, document. Her hands did the work. Her mind stayed at that empty bus stop. Thinner, paler, bruised wrists. During her break, Sarah sat in the staff room with her phone, staring at the screen. She could call the police, report a missing person. But Byung-chul wasn't technically missing. He was homeless, and homeless people moved. They didn't file itineraries. And without proof of foul play, what could the police even do? Sarah pulled up the non-emergency line instead. The dispatcher answered on the third ring. Non-emergency services. Hi, Sarah steadied her voice. "I need to report concern for a vulnerable adult." "Go ahead." "There's an older man, late 60s, Korean, who's been staying at the bus stop on Clayton and 5th. I've seen him there for months. He seemed unhoused, but stable. Recently I noticed bruising on his wrists, Unexplained. And now he's gone, completely. I'm worried something might have happened. The dispatcher typed something. Has he asked for help? No. But he seemed afraid when I asked about the bruising, and now all his belongings are gone, like someone cleared him out. Do you know his name? Byung-chul. I don't know his last name. More typing. And you're calling because... Sarah chose her words carefully. I'm a nurse aide. I know the red flags for elder abuse and coercion. I can't prove anything happened, but the pattern worries me. I just want someone to know he was there, and now he's not. I'll file the report, the dispatcher said. If he shows up again, encourage him to contact Adult Protective Services. Thank you. Sarah hung up, feeling both relief and futility. She'd done what she could. Reported the risk, not wild accusations. No mentions of kidnapping or violence, just the facts she could prove. But facts didn't ease the knot in her stomach. Wednesday morning, empty. Thursday morning, empty. By Friday, Sarah had started to accept that Byung-chul was simply gone. People disappeared from the margins all the time. That was the brutal truth of it. But Saturday morning, he was back. Sarah almost didn't recognize him at first. He sat in his usual spot, cardboard returned, but he looked like he'd aged years in less than a week. Thinner, face drawn, eyes shadowed with exhaustion or fear. Maybe both. Byung-chul. Sarah's voice cracked with relief. He looked up slowly, and something in his expression made her stop short. Not relief, not happiness to see her, wariness. Sarah, he said quietly, you came? Of course I came. Where were you? Are you okay? Byung-chul didn't answer. Instead, he reached inside his jacket, slowly, carefully, and pulled out a sealed envelope, cream-colored, thick, addressed in neat block letters she couldn't read from where she stood. He held it out to her with both hands. Sarah, he said, voice low and urgent. If I disappear again, you give this to hospital, not police. Sarah stared at the envelope. What is it? Truth. Byung-chul's hands trembled slightly. But truth needs right place. Her nurse instincts flared into full alarm. Byung-chul, are you in danger? He looked past her, down the street like he was checking for something, someone. Danger is already here, he said. Then he pressed the envelope into her hands. His grip was surprisingly strong, desperate even, before he released it and pulled back. Please, he whispered. Hospital, you promise. Sarah's pulse hammered in her ears. She should refuse. Should tell him to go to the authorities himself. Should not get involved in whatever this was. But she looked at his face, the exhaustion, the fear, the quiet dignity, barely holding itself together, and heard herself say, I promise. Byung-chul's shoulders sagged with relief. Sarah slipped the envelope into her bag and immediately felt its weight. Not the physical weight, it was just paper, but the responsibility of it. Her bus was coming. She handed Byung-chul his breakfast, but neither of them spoke. The routine that had felt simple for months now felt impossibly complicated. As Sarah climbed aboard and found her seat, she realized with cold certainty this was no longer about breakfast. This was about something she didn't understand yet. Something dangerous enough that Byung-chul would rather trust a stranger than the police, and she just agreed to carry it. Sarah stepped off the bus Thursday morning and saw them immediately. 3 men in dark suits moving toward the bus shelter with the kind of purpose that made pedestrians instinctively step aside. Not running, not shouting, just walking with absolute certainty that the space in front of them would clear. And it did. The one in front was tall, sharp-jawed, moving like he owned the sidewalk. Behind him, a shorter man with watchful eyes circled slightly to the left, measuring angles, scanning exits. The third hung back, his gaze fixed on Sarah like she was a problem he was calculating how to solve. Byung-chul saw them and went rigid. Sarah's stomach dropped. The tall man, Min-sok, though she didn't know his name yet, walked straight to the bus shelter and stopped 3 feet from where Byung-chul sat. His eyes swept over the cardboard, the plastic bag, the flattened existence of a man trying to be invisible. Then his gaze shifted to Sarah. Good morning, Min-sok said in perfect English, his voice smooth and polite. You must be Sarah. The dread hit her like cold water. How does he know my name? She didn't answer. Minsuk's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. You've been very kind to our friend here, bringing him breakfast every day. Very admirable. Sarah's throat felt tight, but she kept her voice steady, the same calm she used with confused patience in the middle of the night. I don't know who you are. My name is Minsuk. He tilted his head slightly, studying her. And kindness, Sarah, can be dangerous. Sometimes it attracts attention. Behind him, the shorter man, Wu Jin, had positioned himself near the edge of the shelter, blocking the natural exit to the street. Not aggressive, just there, a wall disguised as a person. The third man, Ji-ho, still watched Sarah. His eyes flicked to her bag, then back to her face. They were looking for something. Sarah's pulse hammered, but she forced herself to focus on Byung-chul. His entire body language had changed, shoulders hunched, gaze lowered, hands folded in his lap like a child waiting for punishment. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't frailty. This was compliance born from fear. He doesn't look well, Sarah said, her nurse training giving her something concrete to hold on to. When was the last time he ate? Minsuk's expression didn't change. He's been well cared for. He's lost weight. Sarah kept her tone professional, factual. And if he's under stress, he could be at risk for... He needs to come with us, Minsuk interrupted. Still polite, still calm. This is a family matter. Family doesn't usually leave bruises, Sarah said quietly. The air went cold. Minsuk's smile disappeared. For just a moment, Sarah saw something behind the politeness, something sharp and final. Then it was gone, replaced by that same smooth courtesy. You're very observant, Sarah. That's a valuable quality, in the right context. He stepped closer to Byung-chul, who hadn't moved, hadn't looked up. Let's go, Minsuk said, switching to Korean, fast, clipped words that sounded like commands wrapped in formality. Byung-chul's hands trembled. Sarah pulled out her phone, not to film their faces for social media, but because nurses document for safety. She opened her notes app and started typing. 3 men, black suits, Thursday, 5:48 a.m., Clayton and 5th. Ji-ho noticed immediately. Put the phone away. I'm taking notes, Sarah said evenly, not pictures. Minsuk glanced at Wu Jin, some silent communication passing between them. Then he looked back at Sarah, his voice softening into something almost paternal. You're a good person, I can see that. But good people need to understand when to step back. Sarah's fingers tightened around her phone. He's a vulnerable adult. If he needs medical attention, he'll receive it, Minsuk said. From people who understand his situation better than you do. Byung-chul suddenly coughed, hard, rattling, and his shoulders sagged forward like a man collapsing under invisible weight. Sarah moved without thinking, stepping closer under the guise of checking on him. Byung-chul, look at me. She reached for his shoulder, adjusting his collar the way a caregiver might, her hand steadying him. His eyes met hers for half a second. Hospital, he whispered, so quietly she almost missed it. Then Wu Jin was there, not grabbing Byung-chul, but simply leaning in, speaking Korean in a low, steady stream. Not shouting, not threatening, just inevitable. Byung-chul stood, wobbling slightly. His face had gone pale, empty of everything except resignation. Minsuk placed a hand on Byung-chul's elbow, gentle, supportive, like a nephew helping an elderly uncle. Thank you for your concern, Minsuk said to Sarah, that polite mask firmly back in place. But we'll take care of him now. And then they walked away, not dragging him, not forcing him, just guiding him down the sidewalk like a man being escorted to a doctor's appointment. The normalcy of it was the worst part. To anyone passing by, it looked like nothing at all. Sarah stood alone at the bus shelter, the wrapped breakfast still in her hands, untouched and growing cold. Her legs felt unsteady. Her breath came too fast. She'd just witnessed something, intimidation, coercion, control, that looked nothing like the violence she'd been trained to recognize in the ER. No bruises forming in real time, no shouted threats, no struggle. Just quiet, professional dominance, the kind that happened in daylight and left no evidence. Sarah looked down at her phone, at the notes she'd typed. Then she opened a new message to the non-emergency line she'd called before. She didn't have proof of a crime, but she had a pattern. And patterns her instructors had taught her were how you protected people when the danger wore a suit and a smile. She started typing. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen table with a notebook, the cheap spiral-bound kind she used for nursing notes, and wrote everything down. Thursday, October 12th, 5:48 a.m. 3 men in dark suits approached bus shelter at Clayton and 5th. She recorded what she could prove: physical descriptions, approximate ages, the sequence of events. She wrote down Min-Sok's exact words as best she could remember them. She noted Byung-Chul's body language, the shrinking, the lowered gaze, the trembling hands. She didn't write speculation, didn't use words like kidnapping or mafia or trafficking. Just facts, observations, the kind of documentation she'd been trained to keep on patients. Byung-Chul appeared fearful, compliant under duress, left with men without resistance but showed no indication of voluntary departure. By 3 a.m., she had 3 pages of careful notes, time-stamped and detailed. By 4 a.m., she still hadn't decided what to do with them. The envelope sat on the table beside the notebook, sealed and silent. Sarah kept staring at it, turning over Byung-Chul's whispered instruction. Hospital. Not police. Why not police? What was in there that required a hospital specifically, or was it a trap? Some kind of setup she didn't understand yet. But Byung-Chul's fear had been real. Sarah had seen enough genuine terror in her work to recognize it. She left the envelope sealed and focused on what she could control, building a paper trail. At work Friday afternoon, Sarah found her supervisor in the break room. Linda Chen had been a nurse for 30 years and had the kind of steady, unshakable presence that made people trust her instincts. She looked up from her coffee as Sarah approached. "Linda, can I ask you something? Hypothetically?" Linda's eyebrows rose slightly. Hypothetically usually means it's not hypothetical. Sarah sat down across from her. If you suspected an older adult was being coerced, not in a facility, just someone you knew, what's the right way to report it without making things worse? Linda set down her coffee. Define coerced. Unexplained bruising. Fear responses. Being removed by people who claim to be family but don't act like family, and the person seems too afraid to ask for help directly. Linda was quiet for a moment, studying Sarah's face. "This is someone you know personally?" "Someone I see regularly. I've already called Adult Protective Services twice, but I don't know what else I should be doing, or if I'm overstepping." "You're not overstepping if you're reporting genuine concern." Linda leaned forward. "Here's what you need to understand. Your job isn't to investigate or prove anything. Your job is to document what you observe and report it to the right channels. APS connects the dots. Law enforcement connects the dots. You just provide the pieces." "What if reporting makes things dangerous for him?" "That's a valid fear," Linda said carefully. "But silence guarantees nothing changes. You report facts, dates, times, observations, without dramatic accusations. You let professionals assess risk and you don't play hero. Understood?" Sarah nodded, throat tight. "Are you safe?" Linda asked, her voice softening. "These people who came, did they threaten you?" "Not directly, but they knew my name. They knew I'd been helping him." Linda's expression hardened. "Then you need to be smart. Keep documenting, keep reporting, but don't confront these people again. If you see something else concerning, call it in and step back. You're a nursing student, not a detective." "I know." "Do you?" Linda held her gaze. "Because I've seen good people get hurt trying to fix things outside their scope." Sarah looked down at her hands. "I just keep thinking, what if I'm the only person who noticed? What if I stop paying attention and something happens?" "Then you've done what you can do," Linda said firmly. "You've reported it multiple times. That's not nothing, Sarah. That's exactly what you're supposed to do." That evening, Sarah called Adult Protective Services again. This time, she had specifics. Names, first names at least, dates, descriptions of the men, the pattern of Byung-Chul's disappearances and returns, the bruising, the fear response. The intake worker typed everything methodically. "We'll add this to the existing case file. If the situation escalates or if you see him again, call immediately." What happens now? "We investigate within our capacity. If we determine there is imminent danger, we coordinate with law enforcement. but I can't give you details about our process." "I understand." After she hung up, Sarah felt simultaneously relieved and helpless. She'd done what she was supposed to do, built the paper trail, reported through proper channels, but it still felt like not enough. Saturday morning, Sarah went to the bus stop. Carefully, she checked over her shoulder 3 times walking there, scanned the street for dark suits and watchful eyes. Byung-chul wasn't there. The cardboard was gone again. Sarah waited through 2 buses, then forced herself to leave. At work Monday, she moved through her shift with half her mind elsewhere, checking her phone during breaks for missed calls from APS, from the police, from anyone who might have information. Nothing. It wasn't until late afternoon, during the shift change, that Sarah saw it. She was reviewing the patient transfer list, new admissions from the ER, discharges, room changes, when a name caught her eye and made her breath stop. Byung-chul, male, 68, admit date 10/14, diagnosis, dehydration, acute stress reaction, room 412. Sarah's hands went cold. The bus stop had just entered her workplace, and she had no idea if that was a rescue, or if the danger had simply followed him inside. Sarah found him in room 412, behind a thin privacy curtain that did nothing to muffle the sounds of the hospital. Monitor beeps, distant call bells, the shuffle of footsteps in the hallway. Byung-chul lay in the narrow bed, eyes closed, an IV line running into his left arm. His hands rested on top of the blanket, and even from the doorway, Sarah could see the bruising. Dark purple and yellow across his knuckles, like someone had gripped him hard enough to leave fingerprints in his bones. His face looked hollowed out, dehydrated, exhausted in a way that went deeper than lack of sleep. Sarah stepped inside quietly, pulling the curtain closed behind her. "Byung-chul?" His eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first. Then they found her face, and something shifted. Relief so profound it looked almost like pain. "Sarah," he whispered. "You came." She moved to his bedside, her nurse training kicking in automatically. She checked the IV flow rate, glanced at the monitor displaying his vitals, heart rate elevated, blood pressure low, but stable. "I'm here," she said softly. "How are you feeling?" "Tired." His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it in days. "Very tired." Sarah pulled a chair closer and sat, keeping her voice low. The walls in hospitals were thin, and she didn't know who might be listening. "Can you tell me what happened? How you ended up here?" Byung-chul's gaze slid toward the curtain, then back to her. "I collapsed. On the street. Someone called ambulance. And Min-suk, the men who came for you?" His hands twitched on the blanket. "They do not know I am here. Not yet. Byung-chul." Sarah leaned in, careful not to push too hard, but needing to understand. "What's happening? Why are these men after you?" For a long moment, he didn't answer. His eyes closed again, and Sarah thought he might have drifted off. Then, "Min-suk controls things. Papers, money, people who have nowhere else to go." Sarah's stomach tightened. "What kind of papers?" "Documents that keep people trapped. Visas, debts. He makes people disappear into work they cannot leave. I know this because..." Byung-chul's breath caught. "Because I fixed something I was not supposed to fix." "Fixed what?" Byung-chul shook his head, exhausted. "Records, watches, things that tell time and truth." His words were fragmenting, slipping into metaphor or maybe just confusion from stress and dehydration. "I saw what he did, and I wrote it down." The envelope. Sarah's bag felt suddenly heavy where it sat beside her chair. "Is that what's in the envelope?" she asked quietly. "Evidence?" Byung-chul's eyes opened again, sharper now. "Yes, but evidence needs..." "Right place, right people. Not police who can be paid. Not reporters who will make noise and disappear me faster." Sarah understood then. He needed institutional protection. Systems that couldn't be easily corrupted or intimidated. "The hospital has people," Sarah said carefully. "Social workers, case managers, people who are legally required to report exploitation and abuse. They have channels, secure ones." Byung-chul studied her face like he was measuring whether to trust her completely. You promise? He asked, his voice breaking slightly. You promise they will listen? I promise I'll get it to the right people. I can't control what happens after that, but I can make sure it's safe. That you're safe. Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out the envelope, Byung-chul's eyes fixed on it like it was both salvation and curse. I'm going to give this to the social worker on duty, Sarah said. She's trained for this. She'll know how to protect you and handle this properly. Byung-chul's hand shot out suddenly, surprisingly strong, and wrapped around Sarah's wrist, not pulling, just holding on like she was the only solid thing in the room. Not just hands, he breathed, his grip trembling. The right heart. You have the right heart, Sarah. Her throat tightened. She placed her other hand over his. I'm going to do the right thing, I promise. His grip loosened slowly and he sank back into the pillow, exhausted from even that small effort. Sarah stood, the envelope clutched in her hand. I'll be back to check on you. Rest now. Byung-chul's eyes were already closing. Thank you, he whispered. Sarah found Margaret Torres, the hospital social worker, in her office on the 3rd floor. She explained the situation carefully, no dramatic flourishes, just facts. An older patient possibly caught in a coercive situation, evidence he'd entrusted to her, men who'd approached him with concerning behavior, documentation of patterns she'd already reported to APS. Margaret listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with each detail. When Sarah handed her the envelope, Margaret held it carefully, like it was exactly what she knew it was, a burden of responsibility. I'll get this to the right people, Margaret said. Legal, compliance, and I'll coordinate with APS and law enforcement if needed. In the meantime, I'll make sure his room is flagged. No unauthorized visitors. Thank you. Sarah, Margaret's voice softened. You did the right thing bringing this here. But now you need to step back. These situations can escalate in ways you can't predict. Sarah nodded, even though stepping back felt impossible. The parking lot was nearly empty when Sarah left the hospital an hour later. The sun had set, leaving only the harsh glow of streetlights and the distant hum of traffic. Sarah walked toward the bus stop, her bag over her shoulder, exhaustion settling into her bones. Halfway across the lot, she heard footsteps behind her, not close, not running, just there. She glanced back. A figure in dark clothing, too far away to make out features, walking in the same direction. Coincidence. Had to be. Sarah kept walking, but her pulse quickened. The footsteps continued, matching her pace. At the edge of the parking lot, a black sedan sat idling, engine running, headlights off, windows tinted too dark to see inside. Sarah's breath caught. She turned toward the bus stop, forcing herself not to run, and when she glanced back again, the figure had stopped, just standing there, watching. The sedan's engine revved once, a quiet reminder that it was there. Then the footsteps resumed, fading in the opposite direction. Sarah reached the bus stop and sat on the bench, her hands shaking. Nothing had happened. No threats, no confrontation. But the message was clear. We know where you work. The knocking came 2 days later at 5:12 a.m. Not a polite tap, not a neighbor checking if she had sugar. The kind of knocking that announced itself as a verdict before the door even opened. Sarah was in her kitchen, still in scrubs from the overnight shift, holding a mug of coffee she hadn't tasted yet. Her body went rigid at the sound. Through the peephole, 3 men in dark suits, standing in formation like they'd rehearsed it. Min-sok in front, Woo Jin to his left, Ji-ho scanning the hallway like he was cataloging exits and witnesses. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. She didn't open the door. Can I help you? Min-sok's voice came through, calm and smooth. Sarah, we need to talk. I don't think we have anything to talk about. I think we do. A pause. It's about Byung-chul. May we come in? No. Silence. Then Min-sok's voice again, still polite, still patient. We can talk through the door if you prefer, but your neighbors might find it interesting. Sarah's mind raced. She lived in a building where walls were thin and people noticed things. Min-sok knew that. He was giving her a choice that wasn't really a choice. She unlocked the deadbolt but kept the chain latched, opening the door just enough to see them clearly. Minsok's smile was thin and humorless. Thank you. This won't take long. What do you want? You've been very involved in Byung-chul's situation. Minsok tilted his head slightly, studying her face. We appreciate your concern, but he's receiving proper care now. There's no need for you to continue interfering. I'm not interfering. He's a vulnerable adult, and I reported concerns through appropriate channels. That's what I'm trained to do. Minsok's smile didn't waver. Trained? Yes. You're a nurse aide, correct? Working toward your RN? The fact that he knew that, knew specifics about her life, sent ice through her veins. I did my job, Sarah said, keeping her voice steady even though her hands wanted to shake. Nothing more. Your job, Minsok repeated softly, is to care for patients in your facility, not to involve yourself in private matters that don't concern you. Behind him, Woojin's gaze flicked down to Sarah's hands, then to the small table visible through the gap in the door. Scanning. Searching for something. The envelope. Sarah felt a flash of relief that she'd already given it to Margaret, that it was already in the system, beyond their reach. Byung-chul asked me for help, Sarah said carefully. I provided it, that's all. Minsok's expression hardened slightly, the politeness slipping just enough to show something colder underneath. Sometimes help creates more problems than it solves, for everyone involved. Is that a threat? It's a reality. Minsok leaned closer to the gap in the door, his voice dropping. You seem like a smart woman, Sarah. Smart women understand when to step back. And if I don't? Minsok's smile returned, colder now. Everyone is afraid of something, Sarah. Maybe it's losing a job, maybe it's safety, maybe it's something else. The point is, fear is reasonable. It keeps people alive. Sarah's pulse thundered in her ears, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. I've already reported everything I know to the proper authorities. I don't have anything you want, and I'm not going to stop advocating for someone who needs protection. For a moment, no one spoke. Woojin shifted slightly, his eyes meeting Minseok's in some silent communication. Jiho's hand moved to his pocket, not reaching for anything, just resting there, a reminder of possibilities. Then Minseok straightened, his expression smoothing back into that false courtesy. We'll leave you to your morning then, but I hope you'll think carefully about what I've said. He started to turn away, then paused. Oh, and Sarah, be careful walking to the bus stop. Early mornings can be dangerous. You never know who you might run into. The words hung in the air like smoke. Then Minseok stepped back, and the three men walked down the hallway in formation, unhurried, confident, like they'd accomplished exactly what they came to do. Sarah watched through the peephole until they disappeared around the corner toward the stairs. Then she closed the door, locked it, and leaned against it, her legs suddenly unsteady. Her hands were shaking now. The coffee mug trembled in her grip. She set it down on the counter and pulled out her phone. First, she texted Linda. They came to my apartment. 3 men. Same ones from the bus stop. I'm okay, but documenting. Then she opened her notes app and typed everything while it was fresh. Date, time, exact words, physical descriptions, the implied threats. Everyone is afraid of something, Sarah. Be careful walking to the bus stop. Not overt threats. Nothing that would hold up in court on its own, but threats nonetheless. Carefully worded, plausibly deniable intimidation. Sarah's phone buzzed. Linda. Call me as soon as your shift ends. Do not engage with them again. Sarah stared at the message, then at her apartment door. The knocking had stopped. The men had left, but they hadn't left like they'd lost. They'd left like they were recalculating, like the conversation had been a test, and they'd gotten the information they needed. Sarah realized with cold certainty, the next move wouldn't be a conversation. It would be something else entirely, and she had no idea how to prepare for it. The schedule change came 3 days after the knock. Sarah arrived for her Thursday shift and found her name moved to weekends only, a rotation she hadn't requested and couldn't afford. Weekend shifts paid the same but killed her class schedule and any chance of picking up the weekday overtime that kept her rent current. She found Linda in the medication room. Did you change my schedule? Linda looked up, confused. No, I don't handle scheduling anymore. That's administration now. Why? I'm suddenly weekends only, starting next week. Linda's expression darkened. Let me look into it. An hour later, Linda pulled Sarah aside. Administration says it's about workload balancing, but the timing feels convenient, doesn't it? Sarah's stomach sank. Can they do that? Technically, yes. You're not union, and your contract allows schedule modifications with a week's notice. Linda's jaw tightened. But I don't like it. This feels retaliatory. For what? Reporting a vulnerable adult? For making someone uncomfortable, someone with reach. Linda lowered her voice. Sarah, I need you to be careful. Document everything, but don't give them a reason to escalate. I haven't done anything wrong. I know, but sometimes doing the right thing makes you a target. By Friday, the rumors had started. Sarah overheard 2 CNAs in the break room. I heard she's been harassing some patient's family, like stalking them or something. Who? That new girl, Sarah. Administration's watching her. Sarah walked in, and both women went quiet, exchanging glances before leaving. The isolation was subtle but effective. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms. Co-workers, who'd been friendly now, kept interactions strictly professional. Even Mrs. Carter in the cafeteria seemed distant, distracted. Sarah told herself it didn't matter. She'd done the right thing. The system was working, slowly, imperfectly, but working. Except Byung-chul had disappeared again. When Sarah checked the patient list Monday morning, his name was gone. She found Margaret Torres in her office. Where's Byung-chul? Room 412? Margaret looked up from her computer, her expression carefully neutral. He was transferred. Transferred where? I can't discuss patient details with staff who aren't directly involved in his care. Sarah's chest tightened. Margaret, you know why I'm asking. Is he safe? Margaret's professionalism cracked slightly. I've done everything I can within my authority. The envelope triggered an investigation. Elder abuse, labor trafficking, document fraud. But these things move slowly, Sarah. Painfully slowly. So where is he? Protected placement. That's all I can tell you. Margaret's voice softened. You did the right thing. Now you need to let the system do its job. And if the system fails him? Margaret didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was tired. Then we keep trying. We document. We escalate. We don't give up. But we also don't put ourselves in danger trying to fix things we're not equipped to fix. That afternoon, Sarah was called to administration. A woman she'd never met. Late 50s, expensive suit, expression of practice neutrality, sat behind a desk with Sarah's employee file open in front of her. Ms. Johnson, I'm Carol Hendricks, Human Resources. We need to discuss some concerns about professional boundaries. Sarah's pulse quickened. What concerns? It's come to our attention that you've been involving yourself in matters outside your scope of practice, specifically relationships with individuals who are not patients under your care. I reported suspected elder abuse through proper channels. That's within my scope. Multiple times, Hendricks said, her tone pointed. And you've apparently developed a personal relationship with this individual that may compromise your professional judgment. I brought him breakfast at a bus stop. Then I reported concerns when I saw signs of coercion. That's not a boundary violation. That's being a decent human being. Hendricks' expression didn't change. I'm not questioning your intentions. I'm questioning your judgment. When personal involvement affects your workplace reputation and creates disruption, it becomes a professional issue. Disruption? I haven't disrupted anything. You've made accusations about influential community members. You've involved multiple agencies based on limited evidence. Hendricks leaned forward slightly. I'm not saying you were wrong. I'm saying you need to understand the consequences of these actions. Is this a warning? It's a conversation. Consider it guidance for future situations. Hendricks closed the file. We value employees who care, but we also value employees who understand appropriate boundaries and chain of command. Sarah stood, her legs unsteady. Is that all? For now. Sarah didn't go straight home after her shift ended. Instead, she went to the bus stop, the place where all of this had started. Dawn was breaking, casting long shadows across the empty sidewalk. No cardboard, no belongings, no sign that anyone had ever slept there. Sarah stood in the shelter, exhaustion pressing down on her shoulders. She'd done everything right. Documented, reported, escalated through proper channels, and still, it felt like losing. Then she saw it. On the ground near the bench, a paper coffee lid, the cheap kind from convenience stores, not chain coffee shops. Sarah picked it up, turning it over. Still relatively clean, recent, and beside it, half hidden under the bench, a napkin, folded into a precise square. The way Byung-chul always folded things, neat and careful, even when everything else was falling apart. Sarah's throat tightened. He'd been here. Recently, maybe this morning before dawn, which meant he was alive, still moving, still careful, or it meant nothing, just trash that happened to look meaningful, because she desperately needed it to be. Sarah sat on the bench, the coffee lid clutched in her hand like evidence or prayer. "Please be alive," she whispered to the empty street. "Please be okay." The bus came. Sarah didn't get on. She just sat there as morning light spread across the city, holding on to the fragile hope that somewhere Byung-chul was still fighting, and that maybe, just maybe, the system she'd trusted would move fast enough to matter. The call came on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Sarah had sat at the empty bus stop holding a coffee lid like it was proof of life. Margaret Torres's voice on the phone was carefully measured. "Sarah, can you come to my office? There's been a development." Sarah's stomach dropped. "Is he?" "He's safe. Just come in when you can." Margaret's office felt smaller with 4 people in it. Margaret, a woman from the hospital's legal compliance department, a detective from the financial crimes unit, and Sarah. The detective, middle-aged, tired eyes, a stack of folders in front of him, spoke first. "Ms. Johnson, your documentation was extremely helpful. The timeline you provided, the physical observations, the pattern of contact, it gave us enough to move forward with a broader investigation." Sarah's heart pounded. "Move forward how?" "The envelope Byung-chul gave you contained records, financial ledgers, names, dates, evidence of a labor trafficking operation involving immigrant workers held through debt bondage and document control. Your observations corroborated his account and helped us establish credibility." Margaret added quietly, "Without your reports to APS and your detailed notes, we wouldn't have had enough to act quickly. The system is slow, Sarah, but it works when people feed it the right information." "Where is he now?" Sarah asked. "Protected custody," the detective said. "He's cooperating with investigators. Because of his age and the coercion involved, he qualifies for witness protection services and social support. He won't be returning to that bus stop." Relief flooded through Sarah, followed immediately by exhaustion. "And Min Seok?" "Under investigation. We've frozen assets, issued restraining orders, and coordinated with immigration enforcement. His network is being dismantled piece by piece." The detective's expression hardened. "These cases take time, but your documentation gave us leverage we wouldn't have had otherwise." The compliance woman leaned forward. "Ms. Johnson, I want you to understand something. What you did, reporting through proper channels, keeping detailed records, not trying to intervene directly, that's exactly the protocol we teach. You probably saved that man's life by not playing hero." Sarah's throat tightened. "It didn't feel like enough." "It never does," Margaret said gently, "but it was." The cost had been real. Sarah's schedule was still weekends only. Administration hadn't reversed that decision. Her classwork had suffered. She'd missed 2 quizzes and barely scraped through her last pharmacology exam. The rumors at work had faded, but left a residue of isolation she still felt in every break room conversation that stopped when she entered. Some nights she lay awake replaying every interaction, wondering if she'd endangered Byung-chul more by getting involved, wondering if silence would have been safer for both of them. Other nights she remembered his face when he'd whispered, "Not just hands, the right heart," and she knew she'd do it again. The financial strain hadn't eased. If anything, it had gotten worse with the reduced hours. Sarah had deferred another loan payment, let her phone bill slide into the final warning stage, and started walking to work 3 days a week to save bus fare. But she'd also gained something harder to quantify, a bone-deep understanding that advocacy wasn't about swooping in to save people. It was about seeing them, documenting what you saw, using the systems designed, however imperfectly, to protect the vulnerable, and refusing to look away, even when looking cost you something. Linda had pulled her aside last week and said, "I put in a word with the nursing director. Your RN clinical rotations start in January. I made sure you're scheduled for them. Don't let this derail you." Mrs. Carter had slipped her a container of leftovers with a note, "You need to eat too." Small kindnesses. Small acknowledgments that she'd done something that mattered. 3 weeks after Margaret's call, Sarah went back to the bus stop. It was 5:45 a.m., the same time she used to meet Byung-chul. The shelter was empty, the sidewalk bare. No cardboard, no belongings, no quiet man with careful hands and guarded stories. But Sarah brought breakfast anyway. She sat on the bench with a wrapped biscuit and eggs, a thermos of black coffee, and a banana. The ritual felt both pointless and essential. She wasn't waiting for Byung-chul. She knew he wasn't coming back. Protected placement meant safety, meant distance, meant the bus stop chapter of his life was closed. But the breakfast wasn't just for him. It had never been just for him. It was a promise to herself. I will not unsee people. I will not pretend suffering is invisible just because it's inconvenient or complicated or dangerous. A woman approached, older, weathered, pushing a shopping cart full of bottles and bags. She moved slowly, painfully, like every step cost her something. Sarah stood and held out the wrapped breakfast. "Excuse me, I made too much. Would you like this?" The woman stopped, startled. Her eyes, sharp, wary, studied Sarah's face. "No strings," Sarah said quietly. "Just eat something." The woman took it with both hands, carefully, like it might disappear if she wasn't gentle enough. "Thank you," she said. "You're welcome." Sarah paused. "How do you take your coffee?" If someone had asked Sarah what she learned, she wouldn't have said anything dramatic about heroism or justice. She would have said, report patterns, not accusations. Protect privacy. Use the right channels. Document everything. Don't play detective, but don't turn away either. She would have said, stay human, even when it costs you, especially when it costs you. And she would have said, the system is slow and imperfect and exhausting. But silence guarantees nothing changes. Byung-chul was safe now, truly safe, in a way Sarah couldn't have provided on her own. Min-suk's network was unraveling through the unglamorous work of investigators and prosecutors and social workers who'd never get headlines for what they did. And Sarah was back in her scrubs, back on the early bus, back to the exhausting grind of nursing school, and overnight shifts and bills that never quite balanced. But every morning at 5:45, she brought breakfast to whoever needed it. Because in a world full of people who walked past suffering with their eyes down, someone had to stop. Someone had to see. And that, Sarah had learned, was the only thing that made sense.